Hello, hello. Welcome back to Office Hour. It is Thursday, and that means that I get to do one of my favorite things, which is nerd out, learn about interesting social media topics, and have great conversations. So I'm so happy that you have chosen to join us here this morning, or afternoon, or evening, or if you're watching the replay, whatever time it happens to be, because today we are going to have a great conversation about attracting clients using LinkedIn. One of the things that I find frustrating about a lot of training is that it's a lot of theory, a lot of generalizations without specific, tangible steps that you can take to accomplish something. So, with that in mind, today's guest, I'm really excited to have Alan Martin on Office Hour with us today. So, Alan is founder and managing director of Chat Marketing in the UK. And he and I were having a conversation beforehand about where he lives and what's so special about that. So, that's a little teaser. I'm going to bring him on. We're going to talk about where he lives in the UK. But what Chat Marketing does, it's a firm that specializes in helping businesses attract more clients using LinkedIn. And he has developed a great process and steps that you can leave today's session and have really, really good, tangible steps in hand, steps that have been used by clients that Alan has worked with, like Harley Davidson, Volkswagen, Zappos. I will say that I am a consumer of two of those three products at some time, I guess, not necessarily even maybe just one, a consumer of, more familiar with one or the other. So I'll let you guys out in the audience speculate about which of those three brands that I just mentioned I might have personal experience with. Hint, I really like shoes. So if you're watching us live on social media, go ahead, be sure to drop into the comments or the chat, maybe where you're joining us from. Oh, hi, Sean, joining us from the UK, joining us from Scotland. So glad to see you this afternoon for you. Let us know where you're watching from. If you're watching the replay, again, drop in the comments where you're from. And if you are joining us on Social Media Pulse, that's a really great place to join the conversation because, as a previous guest on a different show pointed out, it's really great on the Social Media Pulse community page to have all the comments and all the conversation in one place rather than the various places that we're streaming. But regardless of where you're joining us from, super, super, super glad that you are. So without further ado, Alan, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Ruth. I'm very excited about being here today.
Me too. Me too. So I kind of teased it up a little bit. I'm here in the United States. It is morning for me. It is afternoon where you are. You're in the UK. Tell me a little bit about where you're from because I think it's pretty cool and I think our guests do too.
Thank you. Yes, well, I am just outside St Andrews. Now, for those of you that are interested in golf or have heard of golf, well, I'm sure you've all heard of golf, but those of you that have an interest in golf, you'll very possibly know that St Andrews is world famous because it's the home of golf. So we were talking about the golf course and some royal visitors that went to university there before we came on the call.
Yes, I've mentioned that I am not a golfer. My husband is, and he's that's kind of one of the things that's on a lot of golfers' bucket list to play there. In fact, but my mental association with St. Andrews, yes, it's golf, but it's also Prince William attended university there, and I visited there when he was at school. And you're kind of hoping to get a glimpse, perhaps, but I did not, alas. Sean's joining us from Scotland as well. So love, love, love
Hi,
our
Sean.
UK audience. We also have Fit Today, who's joining us from Kansas City. So thank you guys for joining us. I love the global community that is Social Media Pulse. So very cool. Okay. So let's just dive right in and get kind of into the meat of this. Tell me a little bit, Alan. You run a firm that specializes in helping businesses maximize LinkedIn. How did you get started with that, and what's your background with LinkedIn?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've, and when I was thinking about the session this afternoon or this morning, if you're in the States, I was thinking, how long have I actually been on LinkedIn? And it used to actually tell you within the security settings when you started, but it was definitely pre 2010, which was when I started chat marketing. So a good long time anyway. I got started with LinkedIn probably like a lot of people, where they maybe work for a corporate, you know, work for somebody else, and they were looking to advance their career. And I was introduced to LinkedIn by somebody that said to me, oh, if you're looking for the next career move, you definitely want to be on LinkedIn. So it's really as a job hunting or to find out about opportunities that were coming up. And that's how I first started with LinkedIn. But as a marketer, because I was at the time, I was in I was the marketing manager of a science centre over in Scotland, and I came across LinkedIn and I realized that it was so much more powerful than just a job finding tool. And I started to tell people about this, what else you could do with it, and how you could use it to not just find the next opportunity, but to get better at your current position and find other opportunities. And it just really grew arms and legs from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's one of the things, this month we are doing Mission LinkedIn at Social Media Pulse and have a lot of content about LinkedIn. And that is one of the themes that I'm seeing with people who are really, like you, Alan, are able to differentiate themselves on LinkedIn and develop expertise about LinkedIn, is very early on embrace that idea that LinkedIn is more than, oh, this is where you can be friends with your boss and you don't have to show them your personal life on Facebook. It's more than just, I'm looking for a job and I want people to be able to find my resume. It's what are the features of LinkedIn that can help us accomplish something, and that something is a little bit different for everyone. And I think a lot of people were just slow to come around to that. And you seem like you're one of the earlier people to come around to that idea.
Thank you. Yes, I think that even now, one of the reasons I love teaching LinkedIn is because when I get in front of a new group of people, or if a company hires me to come in, they're just so impressed by some of the really advanced search features, for example, that are available, that it's almost like you're showing them black magic, and it's almost like they didn't realize that this was so available and on the free plan as well, which is excellent.
Mm-hmm. I think, and it's cliche to say, but I think LinkedIn really is one of the best kept secrets, even though it's not secret, just about how functional it is. And they've really rolled out a lot of new features in the last 12 to 18 months. So before we start talking about your steps, what are you most excited about the future of the LinkedIn platform, or some of the features that they've rolled out recently that, again, for lack of a better word, excite you about that, Alan?
Yeah, well, just like all social platforms, LinkedIn is constantly innovating and adding new features. And I'm really excited about the new creator mode. Now, if I was speaking to people individually, I'd be able to advise them whether or not it was right for their individual business situation. But just to give you a flavor of whether it might be right for you, some of the things that it will unlock, and it's maybe worth just explaining a little bit about creator mode, that it does, on the surface of things, you might not think it's that impressive, because essentially what it does is it reorganizes some aspects of your profile to prioritize content over connections, for example. But some of the new features that it will give you access to is LinkedIn Live, which is absolutely fantastic, because the LinkedIn Live has been in beta for quite some time, and I've been told that they're not planning to release it just to everybody. So the best way to get access to LinkedIn Live is by enabling creator mode. So it's a little bit different from Facebook Live in that you need a third-party tool like what we're using today, StreamYard or Restream or one of these third-party tools. But essentially, so you can stream live, and just like Facebook, where they're trying to prioritize live videos, you get a lot of visibility from your live videos on LinkedIn. So that's the first one. The second one is it enables you to do LinkedIn newsletters from your personal page, which is absolutely fantastic, because a lot of people are concerned with GDPR when it comes to email marketing, or California, I know, has really strict data privacy laws. And when they look at setting up third-party tools like MailChimp or ConvertKit or one of these other platforms, there's all this thoughts, particularly if you're based in Europe, there's all the kind of privacy settings you need to enable that might not be automatically enabled. And then there's the aspect of, well, I've now got to build my email list and all that kind of stuff. If you already have a sizable connections list on LinkedIn, you can set up a LinkedIn newsletter, and basically all the people that are connected to you personally are notified that you set up this newsletter and can then subscribe. So it's a fantastic way to do email marketing without having to use a third-party platform. And lastly, you can set up audio events, which is fairly new, and I haven't tried that yet, but essentially it's like basically like an audio only event that you can schedule, and you can bring on guest speakers and so on and so forth. So that's potentially really exciting, although I've not had an opportunity to play with that feature yet.
Yeah, I haven't used audio events either. And my LinkedIn profile is set to creator mode, mostly just for kind of experimenting and exploring, because I think, again, that's something that some people are a little apprehensive of, just like using LinkedIn beyond just the typical boring CV or resume, is using it in creator mode. If you don't consider yourself a content creator, I think we've gotten such a large ecosystem of people creating amazing content. If you're not really a content creator, you might be hesitant to adopt creator mode. So I really appreciate that good laundry list of reasons why creator mode might be useful to you, even if you're not creating a lot of YouTube video content, for example.
Yeah.
Okay, and we do have a comment here from Oscar. I'm going to go ahead and throw Oscar up on the slide here, because Oscar is joining us from LinkedIn. We had a great conversation, if you can call it a conversation, last week about some functions on LinkedIn. So thanks for joining us again today, Oscar. That's something that's interesting as well about LinkedIn, is the ability to connect with people professionally that you might not know in your personal life. And Oscar's an example of that. We're connected on LinkedIn now, and through more of a professional connection instead of a personal connection. So thanks for joining us today. Okay, so LinkedIn, a lot of cool features, but still is a little overwhelming. So we're here to talk about your process today, Alan, for attracting clients using LinkedIn. So Social Media Pulse, we're specifically targeted for social media professionals across the board. That's a lot of variety, a lot of shapes and sizes there. But I understand that you have a 6-step process to help anyone on LinkedIn attract clients. So I would love for you to share about that with us today, and share with our audience your great tips and steps. So can you give me an overview?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can go over a sort of a high level what each step is, and if you'd like me to dig into each individual element in turn, I can definitely go into that in more detail. One thing I would say, and you touched on that there about the different people, the audience for Social Pulse. We've got some people that are running their own business, other people that will be doing the marketing for other companies who work for a corporate. Now, the 6-step process works regardless of whether you're doing it for another company, or you're doing it for your clients, or you're doing it for your own business to get more leads and sales and so on and so forth. But what I would say is each element you might tweak it slightly. It's still the same. It's still important that you access each of the 6 steps, but you would do it in a slightly different not a different order, but you would prioritize different steps, for example, depending on, and I can perhaps touch on some of that as we go. So kind of a high level view, the 6 steps. Oh, and the other thing that's worth mentioning is the first, whenever I'm doing LinkedIn and I training and I explain this 6-step strategy, people start to get really excited about step number 4 and they just can't wait to get stuck in, and they're like, show me step number 4 and beyond. But the thing is that each step builds on the step before that. So if you rush to step number 4, it's just going to be a bit like pouring water into a leaky bucket, and it's just not going to be effective and a bad use of your time. So the first 3 steps are the foundational elements, and then the second 3 are more of the kind of proactive steps that you can take once you have the basics set up. So high level, quick 6 steps. The first step is to optimize your LinkedIn profile. And you do that for search and impact. Again, we can dive into each of these. The second step is to create and or optimize your company page. So even if you're just a small one-person business, you still want to create a company page, and I can touch on that as well. Then step number 3 is to connect with people you already know. Now, LinkedIn, when they first started, and for those of you that have been on LinkedIn as long as me, or maybe even longer, you might remember that in the quote unquote olden days of LinkedIn, when you reached out to connect to people that you didn't know, a box would appear that would say, how do you know these people? And you'd have to indicate whether you was a work colleague. And then there was an option that said, I don't know this person. I used to call that the Rottweiler box, because if you said you didn't know this person, you get a sort of in my mind, it was an angry message that said, how dare you reach out to connect to these people? But they've loosened their tie recently in recent years, which is great.
It's funny you mentioned that, because now that you do, I vaguely remember that. I think I got LinkedIn. I was probably a university student. I think maybe when LinkedIn launched or when I adopted it, and you'd have to indicate if it was a colleague or a classmate, even, I think was one of the settings. So that was kind of like a nice little nostalgic memory for me there, because I had forgotten that was a thing.
Yes, it was these little radio buttons, and I used to laugh when when I saw that. But and I can't pinpoint exactly when it went away, but yes. But although we kind of laugh at that now, it's just like any other social network. You do want to link to people that you don't necessarily know. I'll come on to that in step number 4. But step number 3, it's still wise to start that way, because when you look at step number 4, that will make more sense. But the kind of gateway to the strategy is to start off with connecting to people that you already have a relationship with, that would know who you are. So that's step number 3. Step number 4 is when you start prospecting, and that can be for referral partners, or it could be for leads and potential opportunities for you, obviously depending on what your business aims are. Step number 5 is to engage through content. So that could be your own content. There's a variety of different places you can publish content on LinkedIn, both from your personal profile and also from your business page. But there's also the engaging in other people's content, because there's super users on LinkedIn that have lots of people that are connected to people that would be great, perhaps referrals for you or prospects. And it's how do you engage with these people so that it's not salesy at all, but you're adding value to these people, and yet potentially signposting people to you as well. So that's step number 5. Step number 6 is social selling, which isn't just about selling on social media. It's actually about how do we take people from LinkedIn to somewhere else where we can nurture them off that platform. And you can do that using organic techniques and or adverts, if you have some budget that you'd like to put towards LinkedIn ads.
Okay, really nice overview of the 6 steps there. Like many of the people you've trained before, I definitely am really interested in step 4 about prospecting. But let's loop back a little bit and talk about each step in depth, starting with that you've got to optimize your personal profile first. So Can you expand on that a little bit, Alan? And yes, I did throw it up here in the banner, and yes, I did use the American spelling of optimize. So use an S if you're in Europe or the UK, but I've used a Z. My apologies.
That's okay. I think we're so used to reading American blogs, etc., now that probably most people wouldn't wouldn't worry too much. Yeah. So we look at the personal profile, and for those of you that are maybe more familiar with Facebook marketing, for example, you've got personal pages and then you've got business pages, and very much the kind of etiquette is that your company page is where your business page is where you would talk about what you do and all that kind of thing. Your personal page is more for friends and family, although obviously some people use their personal profile more for business. But with LinkedIn, because it is a business to business network, even your personal profile you can tailor for business. Now, this is your personal profile. This is a key area. Remember, I was saying at the start that if you were either running or doing this for your own business, or if you were doing this for a company, you might approach this in a slightly different way. And I mentioned you're optimizing your profile for search because LinkedIn has a great relationship with Google, unlike some of the other social networks that really don't have a great relationship with Google. And Google would rather show absolutely anything else than a post from from one of those. However, for some reason, LinkedIn and Google seem to play nicely together. So if you put keywords in the correct places in your LinkedIn profile, it's actually possible to get that coming up even quite highly in a Google search. So not only does LinkedIn have a fantastic advanced search tool, which I believe we'll maybe do a little demonstration of shortly, but it can also have your profile ranked on a Google search. And for those of you that know anything about SEO, search engine optimization, it can be really challenging to have your profile ranking in that sort of Google first page top level spot. However, it's comparatively easy. I've had people, when I'm doing a workshop, for example, within 2 or 3 hours, they're ranking in the top 5 in their industry, that kind of thing. So it's comparatively easy compared with optimizing your website. And then there's the second part of it, which is the impact. So one of the things about that is when people come to your LinkedIn profile, they need to understand what it is you do and how you can potentially help them. So probably the most obvious representation of that is the banner image, for example, at the top of your profile. And that's a key bit that you would do differently if it was like a company that you owned versus somebody you worked for. And if you work for an organization, especially if you're the champion, the LinkedIn champion, you're wanting to leverage LinkedIn and show other people within your organization how to get more from LinkedIn, you can create a banner image that all the employees adopt. Obviously, you can't force people to do that on their personal profile, but that's really good practice to do. Feel free, you can tell I'm passionate about this, so feel free to jump in and ask any questions.
So I actually do have a question for you, Alan.
Yeah.
You mentioned possibly demoing some of this, and at any time, if you say, hey, I just want to show you, we can pull up the screen. That's the great thing about StreamYard. We can do that. But you mentioned about putting keywords in strategic places within your personal profile. Can you explain a few of what those places might possibly be?
Absolutely, yeah. So there's certain key places that have more weighting, if you like, but the more places you can put keywords that you want to get found for, the better. So I'll go over the key places. But first of all, that you need to have an understanding of who you're trying to reach, or what people would be searching for if they want to find you. And this is really important, particularly if you work for an organization where there might be multiple people trying to achieve similar things. So I've worked with a lot of organizations where they maybe have a large sales team. So rather than everybody trying to optimize for the same keyword and then they'd all be competing against each other effectively, with a bit of planning, you could say, well, somebody's going after this sector, and you can kind of divvy up the that. But essentially the main places to put your keyword is, first of all, in your headline, and that's the bit that sits underneath your name. then also in the About section. Now, that's an important one to take note of, because now within LinkedIn, it's not a default part of your profile. You have to go in and click a button that says Add Profile Section. Didn't used to be, but it is now. So for those of you that are newer to the platform, you need to go in and add the About section. And also, because it only shows about 3 or 4 sentences before you get to the See More link, it doesn't look like a very important section. So, but it's actually more important than it perhaps looks. And you can have up to 2,600 characters, and you can really go to town there with keywords and using that. Again, I don't know if that's something that you want me to showcase, because I have a slightly different approach to that. Would
I
that
would
be useful?
love that if you're comfortable doing that. Yeah, I think that's seeing it is always helpful. So yeah, if you want to pull that up and get that going, and while you're working on that, I'll just kind of pontificate a little bit about this idea about the About section. That was completely news to me, that you could have that many characters in the About section. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know how long my About section is, and I probably need to go back and tend to it. So as far as keywords go, I think a lot of people like to use words like I'm a such and such rock star or such and such ninja. Are those the types of words that we want to be optimizing for? Or when we say keywords, what are the types of words that we're trying to think about there?
Yeah, I think it very much, that's a great question. And I think it depends on your personality or your brand personality. And I'm not to say that you shouldn't use the word ninja, but when you think about search engine optimization, nobody's going to be searching for a LinkedIn ninja or a SEO ninja in a LinkedIn search. So, I wouldn't say don't do it, but it's not, yeah, if it's your brand personality, that's fair enough. But sorry, we're going to say something there, Ruth?
No. I was just pulling up your sharing this screen.
Yeah. So this is the About section. You can see that it doesn't look that impressive because you can only see about 4 lines. But if you click on the See More, it's worth just pointing out how I do this different. I'm by no means unique in this way. A lot of people are doing it the same way. And this is key if you are running your own business and you're looking to get more clients. Maybe I would advise a slightly different approach, although it's more of a hybrid approach. But what I have here is I have a testimonial. Then I have a little description of what I do, what we offer. Now there's some there's some links, but they're not actually hyperlinked, which is a little bit disappointing. But if somebody really wanted to buy a course, for example, it's not too difficult to cut and paste, if they really want to. I also have contact details here. Now, there's a section at the top of your profile for contact information, but I sometimes people come to me with very little LinkedIn experience, and so I don't want to just assume they know how to get in touch with me. So I have in my About section, I've got contact details, and then a couple of calls to action. I'd love to connect with you here on LinkedIn, so feel free to send me an invitation. That's the reason I've got that is because some people still think that they should only connect to people they know. So this is just to let people know that, yeah, pretty much I'm going to accept their connection request. And then this one here, if you're interested in learning how to leverage LinkedIn, you can book a free strategy session with me. That just links to my online diary and online calendar, and we can set that session up for people. So this is, you've got to think about this when you're writing your About section. In the ideal world, if your dream customer comes across this, what do you want them to do? And this is what I want them to do: book a strategy session. So that's the call to action button. And then lastly, this bit here is just for search engines. But when it comes for search engines, actually you have to remember there's actually 2 audiences. There's people that are reading your profile, and then there's the search engines themselves. So I don't want to just put a bunch of random words there. So that's why I've got this little heading: key skills. So it still makes sense whether you're reading as a person or whether it's the search engines. So that's just keywords that you want to get found for. And whilst I am screen sharing, I may as well show you this as well, that other places you can put keywords in is in your job titles. So Sorry, Ruth, were you going to say something there?
Nope, I'm just taking it all in.
Okay, no problem, because I can't see you. I can just see my screen there while
Okay.
I'm sharing. But like my job title is managing director. That's my official job title. But the only people that are going to be searching for that are HR type companies, recruitment that might want to hire me or something like that. The average person that wants LinkedIn training is never going to search managing director. So you'll see here I've got LinkedIn trainer and coach. So that's what they might be searching for. Or and I've added in keywords where it makes sense. So you want to go through your work experience and think about how you can add in keywords relevant to what you want to get found for, if that makes sense.
Yes, those are some fabulous tips. And in the interest of time, since we have 5 more steps to get through,
Okay.
do you have anything else to add about that step one that we haven't gotten to about optimizing your personal profile before we move on to your company page?
No, there are other things you can optimize, but these are the key things there.
Okay, so as we move on to step 2, I think one of the things that I found particularly novel about your approach, Alan, that made me think about it in a different way than I ever have before about LinkedIn, is really thinking about LinkedIn and optimizing it the same way you would a website. You want calls to action, you want keywords, you want it to be written in natural language, you want to be and provide multiple ways for people to find the right information. And so the similarities between a good website and a good LinkedIn, particularly about section, was really striking to me there.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, now let's talk about that step 2, creating and optimizing a company page, whether you work for yourself or you work for an organization. What are some tips you have about this step?
Well, the first one is create a company page, even if you don't think you need one. Because, well, if you take my business as an example, some people know me as Alan Martin, and other people wouldn't recognize that, but they would recognize Chat Marketing. So it gives you 2 chances of being found. Some people would search for me, and other people would search for my company. So that's it for a start. But also, as your business grows, you might have like virtual assistants that work for you or employees, and they can connect their they can say their place of work is your business page, if you like. So it links the 2 together, and that then makes the business page even more powerful, because you can be sharing company news, and you can actually click a button that notifies all your employees that you've published content. And stats show that employees are more likely to share company updates. So it's a great way to amplify that. Plus, obviously, even if you're just on your own, you want to claim your company page in case somebody else claims it first, and then you've got potential confusion and people going to a competitor, which obviously you don't want. And lastly, on that side of things, is that if you want to do advertising, I know you were keen to chat about ads perhaps at the end, but if you want to do ads, one of the most effective types of ads are sponsored posts, which is a bit like a boosted post on Facebook, but essentially it's a post, and it comes from your company page rather than your personal page. So it's not a personal post you've done, it's a company post. So if you want to do the most effective type of ads, then you need a company page. But yeah, so I think that's the first thing. You definitely want to have a company page regardless of the size of business that you work for. So you want to create one, and then it's about optimizing that. Obviously, there's not a lot you can actually do in terms of there's a lot more on your personal profile about different details you can add, but there's certain information like company size, location, sector, basic information like that. But you want to think about what is it you want to achieve from your company page. Is it for recruitment purposes, which a lot of corporates use their business page for? Is it shareholder information, or is it to get leads for, if you're a consultant, for example, you might want to use your LinkedIn company page to get leads. So for example, on my company page, I have a link to my online calendar because you can have a call to action button as well that directs people to book an appointment with me.
Great. So we had some great conversation about optimizing for search on your personal page. And we've got a great question here from Holly on YouTube in the comments about ranking. Can you rank as a company page and as an individual? So how do search engines treat company pages different than individual pages? And then that second part, how do you increase your ranking as a business? So can you answer some of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've never seen any of the updates from LinkedIn to say that from a search engine perspective that they sort of prefer company pages versus profiles or anything like that. So so effectively, yes, I don't see why you can't rank your company page. The only thing I would say is it's probably harder to rank your company page in search because there's limited opportunities. When I was showing you some of the places on my personal profile where you can add keywords, there's fewer opportunities within the company page for you to do that. So I would imagine it'd be slightly harder, but that's a good point. So thanks, Holly, for asking that.
Yeah.
In terms of improving your ranking, obviously there was the keywords that we were talking about would be still relevant, but also you want to try and get more people to follow your company page. And one of the things that LinkedIn allows you to do, obviously you could share your company page on your personal profile. There's sharing buttons that you can utilize, but there's also the ability to invite your friends, your first degree connections, to like your company page. But can I just add a little word of warning with that? You want to just, when you're going through your list of people to invite, you want to just invite people that it would make sense to. So without naming, obviously, embarrassing any particular type of people, but I've had invitations to like a page that I would never in a million years have any remote interest in, and it's somebody I've obviously accepted a connection request from, but it's not even a client. And of course I would follow a client page, but so do bear that in mind. You don't want somebody thinking, why are they inviting me to like their page? I have no interest in that company. That's worth mentioning.
Yeah, I think this is very common with geographic-based businesses that are going to do business in a very specific location or area. I see this on Facebook. I see this on LinkedIn. Inviting someone just because you're connected to them, if they're not your target audience and they're never going to become a customer, they don't need to like your page, even though you're friends. And I think just as a follow-up to that, I think we were, just discussing the ability for search engines to index company pages versus personal, and then also follow-up question about showcases or LinkedIn groups.
Yeah, so LinkedIn groups, I don't really rate these days. In fact, I think one of your other speakers mentioned this. They used to be so good, LinkedIn groups, but for some reason now they tend to be just full of people promoting links to their blogs. And yes, if you want to read a lot of interesting content, it would be okay, but you could waste hours, go down rabbit holes, and I don't see any business benefits from being necessarily spending the time in marketing groups. I think it's difficult to do search engine optimization for your groups. I would say personal profile is the best place to optimize for search, company page second. Showcase page, not everyone's going to have a showcase page, but I guess the same thing. And they tend to be offshoots from your main business page. And for those of you that don't know what showcase page is, let's say you had a company that had multiple different customer groups. Let's say Virgin Group, there's Virgin Holidays, etc., Virgin Galactic, with very different customer groups. So they might have a Virgin Group company page, and then they would have a showcase page for these different, very distinct customer groupings. But yes, so I would suspect very few people are operating. Obviously, the person that asked the question has a show or is thinking about a showcase page.
Yeah, that's great. And I love that the conversation that's happening in the comments is obviously, hopefully, we're spurring thoughts about how you specifically can do this and use these 6 steps for your business, your personal profile. So that's great. Phyllis is in the chat today and chatting some, and Phyllis definitely can lament about the glory days of groups, whether that was on Facebook or LinkedIn. It seems like although Facebook claims to still prioritize groups, it's harder and harder to reach people with groups. So I like the analogy of, with anything on social media, I like to put the big rocks in the wagon first, and then fill in with the extras. So personal profile that's optimized, a company page that's optimized, and then everything else is extra. Would you agree with that?
Well, these are the cornerstones. The third step is fairly straightforward. It's just about connecting to people you know. And the easiest way to do that is if you go to the Me tab at the top of your LinkedIn profile, you can actually connect up your email system and basically go through your inbox and invite people that it makes sense. Also, if you've got a bunch of business cards, for example, you can invite people by email as well and do that. So step number 3 is fairly quick.
Okay, well, it might be so quick that I might not even be able to get the banner up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, I can talk some more about that.
Move on. Are there any tips that you might have for finding people that you know on LinkedIn? I think that the recommendations and hey, you might know so and so. There's some AI technology there that helps, but do you have any tips for finding people that you might know on LinkedIn?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned the AI because they're getting much better. And you can see, obviously, a good few years ago now, but LinkedIn was bought over by Microsoft, and you can really start to see that computing power and knowledge coming into LinkedIn. And I think that AI is important. So if you go to the Me tab, it suggests people based on who your first degree connections are connected to, and it tries to give you an indication of how you might know them. So again, that's a clue, I guess, as to how you can find people. So whenever you connect to somebody new, I always go into that tab and have a look and see, because new people will appear. But to answer your question, the other thing you can do is you can go into the search tool and you can do something like, for example, you could put in your university or your whatever school you went to, further education, and you will find their company page, and you can click on a button that says alumni, and then you can put in the years that you studied there, and it will show up people that were perhaps your fellow students. So that's a good way to find people that you used to know and perhaps have lost touch with. But you can also go in and put the name of companies you used to work for, or maybe even people you've just met or are about to meet. So whenever I have a new client, I'll go and search for them on LinkedIn. And even if I've got a meeting, if we're not new clients yet, I'll go in and find them and connect with them that way. So you can use the search tool to, for clients you've worked with in the past.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's step 3. And before we move on to the really exciting step 4 that everyone wants to dive right into, I do want to pause for a moment, and I'm going to put up a comment from Oscar that I think is really relevant. So Oscar, like myself, I think I fall into the same boat as well. I'm not necessarily looking for business for myself right now on LinkedIn, but I do think this idea of optimizing for search so you're there if and when in the future you are looking for business, you've got a really nice foundation there. I think all these steps are very, very relevant and applicable, whether you're actively seeking new business or clients or not.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's always a good idea to build your network anyway for the future, and you can use it in in multitude of different ways. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's move on. Step 4, prospecting.
Yes.
And I like, Alan, how you distinguished that you can both prospect for clients and referral partners. So I'm foreshadowing a little bit here about what I think is really cool about step 4 of your 6-step process. But let's dive into step 4,
Yeah.
prospecting on LinkedIn.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to show you how it works, but it's worth mentioning just quickly, just so everybody's very clear, the difference between those two. So a prospect is obvious, that's probably nobody, that doesn't need further explanation, somebody that you would love to work with. But a referral partner is simply somebody that could refer work to you, ideally that's not a competitor to you. So for example, for me, an accountant or a lawyer, accountants are probably ideal for me because I have not met an accountant that ever teaches social media. There's probably one somewhere in the world, but generally speaking, they don't teach social media. But all their clients have businesses. So if I build a relationship with one accountant, then they could potentially refer 10 clients or more to me. So if you are time poor, that's an excellent strategy, because rather than having to build 10 individual relationships, you're building one with an accountant. And the other thing is, when you're reaching out to find good referral partners, they're often just as excited to connect with you, because they could see, well, maybe Alan can refer work to me as well as I could potentially refer work to him. So it's a win-win for both of you. But the great thing is you can use the techniques that I can show you for both of these things. Now, I know we're on a bit of a time budget, so I'll maybe just have time to show you one search example, but it just shows you, hopefully, just how powerful LinkedIn actually is.
Yeah.
So,
And
sorry,
we
we're
say
going to say
office
something.
hour, but we can be office hour-ish if we need to be.
Okay, if you guys are enjoying it, I'll keep going.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
would love to take a look at that. And while you're pulling that up and getting that prepped for us, one thing I have neglected to do today is to go take a look. I've been so engrossed with the conversation, I had not personally gone over and looked at the conversation that's happening in the community. So Deb, our community manager, is doing her thing over in the community, and there's a really, really great recap as we go through today's conversation of these 6 steps, and she's got a nice summary going. So thank you so much, Deb, for community managing and dropping links over in the Social Media Pulse community. And as a reminder, you can go join that conversation and go take a look, whether it's during the replay or if you're on social and you want to dive off and go check it out over there. That is socialmediapulse.info/OH- November 17th. So that ticker's going. And if you are ready, Alan, I'm going to clear out some of this extra stuff and you can walk us through your search tips.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, this is yeah. I just love this. So I'm going to use an example just for speed. I'll use that example of an accountant. But first of all, obviously, if it's your own business, you'll have an idea of who it would be good to connect with. So what I can do, you can either just come in and click on the search box here, and you could type in accountant, and then hit enter. Or you could simply click your mouse into that search box and hit enter. And this takes you to the advanced search page. Now, some people have never been to this page. If you've never been to this page, you don't know what you're missing. It's absolutely fantastic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click people just to make sure that it's looking at people, because it could potentially be searching content, for example, and there's other things it can look at. But when I select people, it's going through people's profile and it's going to tell me who has accountant in their job title, basically. Okay, so that's the first thing, and it's telling me there's over 7.5 million people with accountants. So I'm probably going to need to narrow that down slightly. So then the next thing I would likely do is go to the locations, and what you can do is you can build in different layers of filtering as you go and come up with incredibly powerful search tools. And you can even build in Boolean searches if you want to be even more advanced, but I'll park that one for now. So I might put in San Diego, for example. I'll maybe use one in Scotland, because I don't have that many connections in San Diego. Maybe I will after this. I'll put in Edinburgh just as a local search. Edinburgh. Okay, and I can select multiple cities if I want to, or I could choose the whole of the UK or the States. So I'm just going to go and click show results. Okay, so we're down to 3,900. Okay, still quite a lot. So then what I can do is, the next thing I would do is go to the connections filter. Okay, now you may have heard of the expression 6 degrees of separation, and the idea there is that we're connected to anybody, whether it's Joe Biden or you pick anybody in the world, and you know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody that eventually knows Joe Biden. You get the idea. So that's 6 degrees of separation. I believe it was originally called 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Yeah. Yep.
But
People play that game.
yes, yeah. But LinkedIn allows you to connect up to 3 degrees deep. So instead of being able to go around the whole world, you can go around half the world with LinkedIn. But my own personal views is third degree is a little bit too far. So in this case, what I would do is I would select second. So first degree are the people that you're already connected to.
Mhm.
And this is saying who you're connected to that you could be introduced to essentially. So I now click show results. And this is now coming up to 942. So that's still quite a lot, but then I do have a fair number of LinkedIn connections. If you're not currently using LinkedIn, that you're not that active on LinkedIn at the moment, which is what I often hear, you might not have quite that many. Oh, the other thing you can do, if you want to narrow the search down a little bit more, you could choose a city that's maybe a little bit smaller, or you can come here. But effectively, what you've got is a list of people that are accountants in your chosen area that you could be introduced to. Now, one of the things I often say about LinkedIn is it offers you a number of dropping off points, and you could go old school at this point, and you could literally, I can see with this person here that I have a connection called Johan here. I could, and I don't actually know who he is, but for example, if I did know him, I could potentially phone him up and say, or email, text, whatever, say, hi, Johan, I see you're connected to Andrew. I'd really love to speak to him. Would you mind introducing me to him? But one thing you have to be very careful of is the relationship that you have with this person. So I mentioned in this specific example, I have no idea who Johan actually is. So there'd be no point in me asking for an introduction here. But if we scroll down here, in some searches, there's literally dozens. This person here, we have 5 shared connections. Now, if I was to click on this actually shows who I'm connected to that could introduce me to that person. I'll just go back and search here, and I think it was this person, Stuart, here. So when you're looking at these shared connections, you want to see what the relationship is with them. So, for example, Kesser, I know pretty well. I literally could phone him up and say, would you mind introducing me to Stuart? I think I could help him with his LinkedIn marketing or so and so forth. And if you're sure the person would do that, then that's a pretty good approach. But there may very well be people that you're connected to that you actually don't know, or you've not spoken to them for 6 years or something, and you might phone them up and they might say, oh yeah, great to hear from you, Alan, and then life gets in the way and they won't actually introduce you, and that can happen. In that case, what I would encourage you to do, I'm just going to go back to the original inquiry. I would click on Stuart's name, and then I would click on connect, and then I would add a note. And at that point, I can make reference to those people that we have in common. Now, what I find is, if you just reach out to somebody in random and invite them to connect, people are less likely to do that because they still have this hangover that they should only connect to people they know.
Mhm.
But if you name drop people that you have in common, then I find that it's about 70% likely that they will accept that connection request at that point. So 7 out of 10 people generally accept the connection request at that point. So does that all make sense, Ruth?
It does. It does. And I think that that demonstration of that, really the deep dive into the functionality of search on LinkedIn, is something that I was not aware of. And it's something that I am enjoying learning more about. So thanks so much for showing us that. Okay. If we have any comments with questions specifically about prospecting, we did have one comment from Phyllis that I think is true for a lot of social media managers, is the word prospecting, and the word selling, and the word sales. I think to a lot of people who work in social media as a marketer, we have like certain mental associations with those words, and we kind of we don't want to be the salesman. So I suggested in the comments to Phyllis, perhaps that we just call that identifying potential customers, if that hits a little bit easier. But regardless of what we call it, It's about connecting with people that can help refer business to you or can do business with you. And those are some great tips for doing that, Alan. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And if you do that strategically like that, even just reaching out to the right people, you often get people saying, "Oh, I'm really looking for help with my social media. It was just great that you got in touch with me." So you can get opportunities without, even going further
Yeah.
sometimes.
Okay, step 5, publishing content. I think this is the bane of all of our existence, is about this idea about what do I publish, both as a person or as a company page. So what are your tips for publishing content on LinkedIn, Alan?
Well, I think if we had longer, we could chat about the difference between the content from your company. And I'm happy to answer. As I said, I'm not going anywhere, so happy to stay
Yeah.
on as long as, as long as as long as you'll have me. But in terms of content from your personal page, you don't want to be too salesy at all. I mean, and of course, there's no harm if you have a new product or a new service you're launching. It's okay to kind of mention it, but it's definitely not the place for the hard sell. That's not what LinkedIn's about. It's about professional relationships, and it's about showcasing your expertise above all. So one of the things I recommend people do, and I would say, if and it'd be interesting to do a poll in the group or something sometimes about how often you post, because LinkedIn don't publish statistics on this, but I firmly believe actually it's a reasonably small percentage of LinkedIn users that are actually publishing content at all. They're using LinkedIn as a connection machine, but then they don't really know what to post. So if you're posting at all, then I think you're probably above a large percentage of LinkedIn users. And just like on any social network, there is an algorithm that works behind the scenes. Fortunately, the LinkedIn algorithm is a lot more simple than the Facebook algorithm, for example, but you still want to get people to engage in your content. So posting questions, for example, you know, can work really well, that showcase your expertise, and gets people to answer, like an interesting question. Showcasing your knowledge is a great way to wake up the algorithm and not come across as being too salesy. And then if you think of the process that we've been going through, you've connected to the right people, you're posting content, ideally regularly, but again, we can chat about that. But you're showing up, and then people are seeing that, by virtue of the fact that you're getting engagement on your posts, and then you're becoming a more of a trustworthy source at that point.
Yeah, and I also can stay on. I don't want to rush through some of this great content. So for those who have to leave us at the top of the hour, if you've got another appointment, that's fine. The replay will always be there. And we'll also break it up into clips. So I do have a question for you about this idea, Alan, of you mentioned not being too pushy. LinkedIn is not the place for direct selling, but why do you think so many people get that wrong? LinkedIn gets a bad rap for those cold messages that we get to our inbox, those people who don't even bother to connect and are trying to sell to you in your inbox. Why do you think so many people get that wrong?
Well, I think the mentality, and I think the mentality is that they think, well, it's a business network, people are there to do business, so it's totally okay. A bit like sometimes people think it's okay to send spam emails to a business email address, that it's just part of, that's how they see
Mhm.
prospecting. And there's nothing worse than you connecting with somebody and then they send you a message trying to invite you to a Zoom call, to sell you something straight off the bat, without building that relationship first.
Mhm.
So I think that's the reason why people take that approach.
Okay, makes sense. And you know what? I'm just going to say, I agree, Oscar. Alan is boosting my confidence. He's making me think about some things that I should be doing differently in my personal profile. But I think this is in reference to the comment about, if you are posting content on LinkedIn, you probably are in the minority, and that's a good thing. So I agree that helps me feel better as well. I don't post regularly. I should post more, but just the fact that I posted it all, look, I guess I'm ahead of a lot of LinkedIn users.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, cool.
Oh, yeah, and Phyllis, talking about those cold selling, and I think this is a great segue into our final step about social selling, what it is and what it isn't. I got a form letter this morning from someone I haven't connected in over a year, and he sent the exact same message he did a year ago. I think it just highlights how many people get it wrong.
Yeah, I think we can all go into our message box and pull out a message from somebody that's trying to do something that comes across as icky or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this is where other people might bristle up a little bit at this idea of step 6 then. This idea of selling on LinkedIn. There's a right way to do it, there's a wrong way to do it. You mentioned direct selling, LinkedIn's probably not the place for that. So tell me a little bit about step 6, organic and paid social selling.
Yeah. So the thing is, obviously we are all in business. Well, I guess even if you're doing LinkedIn for a company, you're still trying to drive business results as a result of doing that. It's okay to say that you have products and services available, but there's a way to do it. But social selling more broadly is actually about taking people off LinkedIn and continuing the relationship elsewhere. So I'll go into that sort of to give you different ideas of how that can be done. But where selling your and if you don't like the word selling, just replace it with something else. Well, and I loved your suggestions with the changing the name of prospecting. So if you don't like selling, call it something else. But I worked with a client before that was a network. He was an IT infrastructure person, and he used to do this thing on a Friday where he would post basically like what he'd been working on. So if he had created a new course, he was going into selling online courses and things like that for other people that wanted to become network engineers. So he would say, like just so happened to be on a Friday, basically was talking about what he was working on. So he might say, oh, I've just finished recording video number 6 for our new course on how to be a network engineer or something like that. And he would get inquiries about, oh, tell me when it's ready. Or, so he wasn't saying, hey, I've got a course, come and buy it. It's only £3,000 or whatever, which is probably associated with, everything a lot of social media managers probably want to avoid, those kind of posts, but it still does the desired effect. But more broadly, it's social selling is about taking people off of LinkedIn. And when you're doing that, it's helpful to think about, cold, warm, or hot prospects, or again, change the word prospects if you don't like it. But I think about cold prospects on LinkedIn in terms of people that have connected with me at some point, but they've just reached out to me, and I don't really know who they are, and they don't really know who I am, even though we're connected. And then you've got warm, that's people that maybe have met me, or we've had some sort of conversation. There would be a brand recognition. And then hot is people that I've worked with before, because messages you might send to people would be very different. I could, like, if I had a paid workshop or an online course I was selling, I could go onto LinkedIn Messenger and message a client that I'd worked with before and say, I've got this workshop coming up. Obviously I wouldn't, I would make it sound attractive, but I could literally say, I've got a workshop, it's on this date, this is the price, do you want in? Because they've already bought from me, there's less of a hurdle. They know the service that I provide, and they might still say, oh, I'm not, I can't make on that day, Alan, or I've got something else going on. They might still say no, but there's less of a hurdle they need to jump through compared with somebody that's cold or warm. So when you're dealing with cold or warm connections, and again, you use a similar search to what I was showing you under step number 4, but instead of searching for second degree connections, you're going to be searching for first degree connections. So I might, for example, put in that same search term accountant and then filter by first degree connections in my area. So then I can do all sorts of things. I could invite them to a webinar. I could create a webinar. LinkedIn allows you to create a LinkedIn event, and I could then invite accountants in my area to a webinar. I could plan a webinar about how accountants could learn to use LinkedIn, how accountants could use LinkedIn more effectively to get more people into their practice, for example. Then I could message all the accountants I know and tell them I've got a webinar that's coming on, and then the nurturing happens off LinkedIn, and there's other opportunities like that.
Mm-hmm. So what, those are some great tips. And I think, it's ways to kind of just spin that idea of selling a little bit. And it's more of a soft value added approach rather than just, hey, give me your money
Yeah.
or give me your business. What ideas for, maybe can you use LinkedIn as a lead magnet, where it's a little bit of more inbound type rather than outbound?
Um, I'm not quite sure what you mean by using it as a lead magnet, but you could still use lead magnets. Like, I suppose the webinar is an idea of a lead magnet. You sign up for this, or you could certainly post, if you have an ebook or a free training or anything you would traditionally use as a lead magnet, you could certainly post on LinkedIn and link to that, because
Mhm.
just like on any other platform, you can link to external resources.
Sure. That's exactly what I meant. And, do you recommend that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But it's just like anything, you want to try and mix up the content so you're not constantly doing that. You're
Mhm.
mixing things up a bit. But yes, you absolutely can do that.
Great. Okay, as we wind down here, Oscar has a good question for us. So,
Mhm.
I wonder, if you send a connection request to someone and they reject it, do they still show up in your recommended connections? I don't want to look spammy. Either am I mistakenly sending another request to somebody. Good question.
That is a great question. I'm not, and I have to say, I'm not sure I know the answer to that.
Ask the
If
instructor.
if you send a connection request, you can see you're already sent connection requests, and you wouldn't have that situation, Oscar, because if you went to, let's say it did show you the, like, as a recommended connection, if you went to invite them, you can't invite them twice, is what I'm saying. So that's unlikely to happen.
Okay, that is good advice. So, we have made it through the 6 steps to attracting clients using LinkedIn. Lots of great, specific, tangible advice there. If you had to just wrap it up, what would be a parting thought for our guests, Alan?
Okay, parting thought, I would say have a strategy, and if you like what you heard and you want to utilize that, and obviously you make it your own and you tailor it to what works for you, so it's in your own voice, then by all means. In fact, I'd be delighted if you use that, and let us know in the comments, if you try any of these things. But have a strategy, and post. I think that's one of the key things that will differentiate you from other people, is to have this strategy of posting. Yeah, so hopefully that helps.
Okay, so speaking of, not to say that you were being really strategic here, I'm being strategic here in saying, if you like what you learned from Alan today, Alan does have a mini course that is free. So if you would like to, increase your LinkedIn presence, get to that all-star status, Alan has a mini course. We've got the link there. We'll drop the link in the comments. We'll drop the link in the community. If you would like to learn more from Alan, chatmarketing.co.uk/all-star, free mini course, with some similar concepts about your LinkedIn profile. This has been so great. Thanks so much for joining today, Alan. I appreciate the good conversation, the advice.
You're very welcome, and thanks for inviting me, Ruth.
Yes. So, for all of you who are watching us live or in the replay, thank you for sticking it out for today's episode of what I'm going to call office hour ish, because we did go slightly over an hour, but it was time well spent. I hope you learned a lot. And starting in December, we are going to move toward a twice a month format rather than once a week. So you'll have a little bit of time in between each session of office hour. We'll make you wait for it a little bit longer. But thanks as always for joining us here today. And thanks, Alan, for the great tips and the great conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
My
We'll see you
pleasure.
all later. Bye.
Bye.